never thought a quiet Saturday morning could turn into the most infuriating day of my life, until Karen's son showed up with a trailer full of garbage. And no, this wasn't some minor littering incident. He dumped it square in the middle of my perfectly manicured lawn, like he owned the place. And the best or worst part, he grinned, shrugged, and said, "The HOA will cover it." My blood ran cold. I had just stepped out with my coffee, soaking in the peace of my yard when I saw him backing up the trailer. At first I thought maybe it was a moving mistake, but the way he hopped out, laughing, trash bags in hand, made it clear he had planned this. Newspapers, old fast food wrappers, rotting food containers, all scattered across my grass like some cruel modern art exhibit. My jaw dropped. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shouted, running toward him. He looked at me, smirked, and said again, "Relax, the HOA has got us. You won't do anything." I felt my fists clench, but I reminded myself to stay calm. HOA issues are tricky, and I didn't want to overstep, until I realized he wasn't bluffing about thinking he was untouchable. I ran inside, called the HOA, and got through to the office. The voice on the other end was polite but evasive. "Sir, we don't get involved in neighbor disputes like this. You'll have to handle it directly." I felt my frustration boiling. Their coverage meant nothing. It was just another empty promise from Karen's little army. Next, I called the police. I described the situation calmly, emphasizing that he was dumping garbage on private property, trespassing, and refusing to leave. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived. Karen's son was still standing there, arms crossed, bags of trash at his feet, clearly waiting for a confrontation. The officers approached him. I watched, tense, as they explained the law and his violation. His smug expression faltered. He tried to argue, saying, "My mom said the HOA covers this." But the officers weren't having it. They instructed him to start picking up every last piece of trash, by hand. And when he hesitated, thinking he could defy them, they cuffed him right there, mid-laugh, mid-smirk, and made him clean my lawn from start to finish. As I watched him bend over, scooping up rotting garbage with his bare hands, I realized something powerful. I had set the rules straight, and no amount of Karen magic or HOA bluffing could override the law. This wasn't just a victory over trash, it was a message. No sooner had her son finished picking up every last piece of trash, drenched in sweat and grime, than Karen herself stormed onto the scene. I could hear her high heels clicking furiously against the driveway from down the street before she even arrived. Her face was bright red, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. "What do you think you're doing to my son?" she yelled, waving her hands like a conductor orchestrating chaos. Her eyes darted between her son, the police, and me, as if blaming all of us equally. I stayed calm, hands in my pockets, and let the officers handle the confrontation. One of them stepped forward, firm and unyielding, and reminded her that trespassing and illegal dumping on private property was a crime, no matter what HOA magic she believed in. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, producing a tirade of half-formed threats. "This is harassment. My son didn't do anything wrong. The HOA is on our side. I'll sue you for everything." I had to suppress a chuckle. Her sense of entitlement was breathtaking. All those HOA newsletters about community harmony apparently didn't include consequences for her family's chaos. Her son, still red-faced from manual labor and embarrassment, tried to defend her. "Mom, they're going overboard." But she wasn't listening. She turned back to the officers, flailing like a storm in human form. One officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, the law doesn't care about your HOA, trespassing, and dumping garbage on someone else's property is illegal, and your son will face consequences if it happens again." That seemed to trigger something else in Karen. She stomped her foot, muttering about bias and targeting, and somehow worked in a complaint about my perfect lawn being too intimidating. Meanwhile, I just stood there silently, savoring the moment. There's something incredibly satisfying about witnessing someone realize that the world doesn't bend around their ego. Eventually, the officers guided her away, explaining the next steps if she attempted retaliation. Her son, now thoroughly humbled, avoided my gaze entirely. I could see the wheels turning in his head, probably realizing that his brief illusion of power had been completely shattered. After they left, I inspected my lawn. A few stray scraps remained, but the smell of rot was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of victory. I felt a mix of relief and amusement. I had imagined confrontation and arguments, but seeing Karen's fury collide with the law was far more entertaining than I could have hoped. And yet, even as I cleaned up the final scraps, I knew this wasn't over. Karen never gives up. She would be scheming, plotting, maybe even escalating. I had won this battle, but the war over entitlement and HOA arrogance was just beginning. I thought the ordeal was over, But with Karen, you never get to catch your breath. The very next morning, I woke to find a flurry of HOA notices slipped under my door, threats about violating community guidelines, unapproved landscaping, and even a bizarre complaint about my lawn being too pristine for the neighborhood aesthetic. It was like she had a checklist of ways to make my life miserable, and somehow, the police had only temporarily halted her plans. I tried to ignore it, hoping reason might prevail, but by mid-afternoon, the sabotage escalated. I looked out my window and froze. There she was, Karen, clipboard in hand, marching up my driveway like a general inspecting enemy lines. And behind her, her son, now fully recovered from his humbling experience, carrying a suspicious-looking bag of trash again. I grabbed my phone and called the police immediately, describing the situation as calmly as I could. "We're on our way," they said. But this time Karen was clever. At least she thought she was. She began snapping photos of my lawn, pretending to document violations, waving her arms, and shouting accusations about me, harassing the HOA and intimidating neighbors. It was chaos, but one thing was clear. I couldn't back down. I stepped outside, keeping my distance. "Karen, you need to leave my property immediately," I said firmly. She laughed, a shrill sound that cut through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "You think the law is on your side? The HOA has rules and I'm following them." I didn't bother arguing. The first round had proven that law enforcement wouldn't tolerate her antics, and I trusted they would intervene again if necessary. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, the familiar sirens sounded. 2 police cars rolled into my driveway, lights flashing, officers jumping out. Karen tried to argue, waving her clipboard like a shield. "This is harassment. He's provoking me." But the officers had seen it all before. Calmly they instructed her and her son to leave immediately and reminded them that any future trespassing or property damage would result in arrests. Her son muttered under his breath as he followed her out, and I could see the humiliation creeping back. Karen, on the other hand, stormed off yelling, clearly plotting her next move. I shook my head, laughing softly. She may never learn, but one thing was certain. My property, my rules, and the law were firmly on my side. As the dust settled and silence returned to my yard, I realized I had gained more than just a clean lawn. I had confidence, the law on my side, and a front row seat to witness the unraveling of Karen's entitlement. But deep down, I knew she wasn't finished. This battle might have been won, but the war of wills was far from over. For days, I stayed vigilant. Every morning, I peered out the window, half expecting Karen or her son to attempt another stunt. But the neighborhood seemed unusually quiet. That is, until the third morning, when a suspiciously large box appeared at the edge of my driveway. I cautiously approached it and immediately recognized the HOA branded label. Except it wasn't meant for me. Inside the box were a collection of her own discarded items. Old flyers, broken garden tools, and shredded paperwork. At first I was puzzled, but then the truth hit me. Karen had tried to frame me. She must have planned to claim I dumped trash on my own lawn to provoke a complaint from the HOA. The audacity! My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stay calm and document everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. This time I would be prepared. Later that morning, her son appeared again, dragging what looked like another trash bag. I immediately called the police and HOA, making sure to keep a safe distance. But this time, instead of arrogance, I noticed hesitation in his eyes. The memory of being handcuffed and forced to clean my yard had clearly left its mark. Karen herself wasn't far behind. She marched toward me, screaming about harassment and targeting, but I stayed composed. The police arrived quickly, responding to my call. Their expressions were firm, no nonsense. They reviewed my documentation, compared it to the HOA notices, and shook their heads. Karen tried to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had orchestrated this mess herself, hoping to manipulate the system against me. One of the officers gently but firmly reminded her that filing false complaints and attempting to stage incidents could be considered harassment, and depending on the circumstances, might even result in legal consequences. Karen's face turned red, then pale, as the realization sank in. Her schemes had not only failed, but she had also put herself and her son at risk. Her son, now silently standing behind her, avoided eye contact. It was clear he was beginning to understand the repercussions of their actions. Finally, the officers escorted them off the property, warning that any future incidents would lead to immediate arrest. As they left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Not only had I protected my property, but the law had also exposed Karen's entitlement in full view of the neighborhood. I returned to my yard, surveying the clean lawn and intact garden. The sunlight glinted off the freshly mown grass, a perfect symbol of victory. I had learned something valuable: patience, documentation, and trusting the law could turn even the most chaotic situations in your favor. Karen's arrogance had been defeated, her schemes unraveled, and I finally felt the sweet relief of closure. Wow, what a wild story! Can you believe how Karen and her son tried to get away with that? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button, it really helps me out. Don't forget to subscribe for more crazy HOA and Karen stories. You won't want to miss what's coming next. And I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me what you would have done if this happened in your neighborhood. Let's get the conversation started.